Welcome in to Rover Sports. This podcast is going to be released tomorrow morning. I'm just talking tonight about what I saw play out all day long today and just talking really about college football in general and just giving my thoughts on the day. I thought that I think that the sport of college football is just an incredible product because it truly is from noon till about 1 a.m. on the East Coast. You have nonstop football, and it really doesn't waver. And you can have a game that ends up being a dud, but if you just play the percentages, like you're going to land into some classic football games. And even though Louisville-Clemson was a dud and Lamar Jackson and Bobby Petrino got run off the field by Brent Venables and the Clemson defense, Texas USC, I just got home and watched the end of that game, and Sam Ehlinger, that was such a gutty performance by Texas. After losing to Maryland, down by or trailing by 14-10. What a drive. And then Sam Darnold with 46 seconds left. What really makes Sam Darnold special is that the guy just is an incredible competitor in the sense that he has such a short-term memory, and that's so important for a quarterback when you kind of look at them going into the next level is that, Darnold struggled most of the night, and he just puts everything behind him and just plays the next play and just has this belief that he's going to win the game, and he just doesn't care what the final product is. He's going to go out there and win. And even looking at Josh Rosen today, when you look at Rosen and Sam Darnold, it's no contest in the final 2 minutes. When it comes down to crunch time, the guy is so special, whether it's the Rose Bowl, whether it was tonight, whether it was in Washington. The guy has a quiet confidence. He knows he can win games, and he knows that in the final 2 minutes of games that he's going to pull out the football game. And he knows that the ball's in his hands, it's lights out, and it's game over. That's what makes Sam Darnold such a special player. And with Josh Rosen today, he had a successful game, but he's also takes into account that I just threw an interception. He thinks too much out there, where Sam Darnold it just almost has amnesia to mistakes, and he's just a winner and a special player because of the fact that the guy just when it's time to win the game, he just walks through the door. He doesn't analyze how the game's been going, how I've been throwing today, how this offense has been rolling. It's just like there's 47 seconds left. We're either getting a touchdown or a field goal, no questions asked. Losing doesn't even enter the mind. You looked at Texas's sideline. They thought they had the game, but the Sam Darnold with 46 seconds left, he was just getting started. And you look at Josh Allen, you look at quarterbacks all around 95% of athletes would say, it's just not our night. It's meant to be for Texas and this team to win. And they would fold up tent. They'd probably force a ball into double coverage. But Sam Darnold, the throw he had in this game when he was being pressured, and almost did a jump pass, and it just was an incredible play. Like, he just has such a natural feel for the pocket. Now, does Sam Darnold have the quickest release on deep balls? No, he even throws it from his hips sometimes, which is Blake Bortles-ish, a little scary. If you're going to have a pro day, Sam Darnold's going to rank like 6th or 7th. Lamar Jackson's going to end up beating him, Mayfield. Josh Allen's going to kill Sam Darnold in a pro day, in shorts and a T-shirt. But when you get to the actual gameplay, when you get to the actual football game, when it comes down to winning time, when the chips are on the table, this guy is just a different animal out there on the field. And that's what really showed in that USC-Texas game, which ended up really being a downright classic. That game was just absolutely a phenomenal football game. Looking around college football as well, How about that Florida-Tennessee game? Butch Jones, very inconsistent. Offense is inconsistent. Quentin Dormandy, not very elusive in the pocket. They went with him over Garantano. You have John Kelly and Marquez Callaway. Callaway had some, a couple of catches. Ethan Wolf, good tight end. John Kelly kept him in the football game today. And when you looked at Tennessee and you looked at Florida and Tennessee, Butch Jones he can't go out and decisively win games. Tennessee's defense played just as good as I expected them to play the entire game today, and they were really, really impressive defensively. They actually surprised me. I thought Florida would win the game handily, but I was impressed with Tennessee, their linebacking core, a couple of plays on the defensive ends. Their linebackers, they have guys, the guy in the middle, Jumper, Colton Jumper's a decent player. And Cortez McDowell, they have defensive linemen like Kongbo. That's a high level recruit. They have Hunter, I believe. Nigel Warrior. They have guys, that are decent on the defensive side, and they actually look like a pretty good team. I was impressed by Tennessee. Now, the way that they ended the game was just atrocious, not having guys back to guard against Felipe. And Felipe Franks, he heaved that ball. That was a really impressive play. Now, Felipe Franks is not fast in the pocket. He doesn't utilize his feet to an exceptionary level. He's not good at getting the ball out of his hands quickly. This offense is pretty vanilla at the moment for Jim McElwain. And McElwain, for being an offensive guru, he is not an offensive guru at all. And the offense is really painful to watch on both sides of the ball for a lot of the game. The defense of Florida is very good. They have great talent. Duke Dawson, Chauncey Gardner, Kylan Johnson, David Reese. Their defensive line, I think, is one of the best. They could just totally stuff the run. I know John Kelly was running on them in the second half, but Zuniga, C.C. Jefferson, Taven Bryan, this is a heck of a defensive front, and Florida still has a really good chance of winning the East. And you look tonight at one of the competitors to win the East, and that's South Carolina. And I was buying South Carolina. They went out and beat NC State. They have Jake Bentley, who's a very mature, smart kid for a 19-year-old, coach's son, extremely competitive. Then Deebo Samuel goes down and gets injured, and Deebo's a Heisman candidate. He's a star college wide receiver. He's going to also play on Sundays. He's a kick returner. He's an extraordinary, all-around Percy Harvin type of athlete that gets hurt for South Carolina. They can't run it with Dowdle. Jake Bentley now has Hayden Hurst and Brian Edwards, and now Deebo Samuel's out for the season. And you look at this defense of South Carolina, and they shut down Mizzou and Drew Lock, and I was thinking that was really impressive. I thought South Carolina, they were ready to turn the corner. They were hosting Kentucky at home. It's Kentucky, very lukewarm start under Mark Stoops. I thought South Carolina would come out today, assert that they meant to stay in the East. I was ready to give Will Muschamp credit. I thought that South Carolina would take a victory lap and go 3-0 and really put pressure on this East, because you look at the SEC East, and Georgia, they don't have offense either. They don't have an O-line to block for Michelle and Nick Chubb. Their quarterback, Jake Fromm, and their passing game is very, very raw and undeveloped. And, Jake Bentley is a much better passing game than Jake Fromm and Jacob Eason. And even though Georgia's defense is tremendous, they're quite a unfinished product on the offensive side of the ball with this O-line and everything going on with this Chaney offense. So for South Carolina to lose tonight to Kentucky, just pitiful. It's classic. I guess it's classic Muschamp. Just when you want to give him credit, and they better bounce back. I like Muschamp because he's very honest in his press conferences. He said that the game was really disappointing. He seemed pissed off that they lost. Criticized the team for not taking advantage, but losing Kentucky just dominated them on third downs all night long. Ran the ball consistently on South Carolina. And for South Carolina, I mean, their defensive deficiencies really showed, their defensive inconsistencies. And I don't know if Muschamp can recruit the kind of athletes to come up to Columbia like he could have in Gainesville. So it's just a pitiful loss for Will Muschamp in South Carolina. And they really could have taken control of this East. In the SEC East, Vanderbilt 14-7. Pleasant surprise. Derek Mason, this defense is looking really good. Get another win against Kansas State, who a lot of people consider to be a very good Big 12 team. I'm not sold on Kansas State. You know, I think they're a solid 8-4, 9-3 with Bill Snyder like they've always been before. But I think the top storyline of tonight, you know, I mentioned Sam Darnold. I mentioned the Felipe Franks touchdown pass and how crazy that Tennessee-Florida game was in the fourth quarter with, you know, Justin Martin tracking down the Florida running back, getting the ball out before it was a 70-yard touchdown. It could have been 20-3 Florida. And Butch Jones and his teams, they do fight to the end. And they usually end up getting fortunate at the end of games, you know, whether it be, you know, against Appalachian State recovering, you know, a fumble in the end zone for a touchdown, or the Hail Mary against Georgia. Butch Jones just always seems to find magic at the end of ball games. You know, in the second half. The team usually plays terrible in the first half. That's a case under Butch Jones. You know, his teams always are awful in the first half. Sometimes they're awful throughout, but they just are flat. You know, they're a team that takes on the identity of the coach, and a lot of times they can be flat. Against Georgia Tech, they were flat. Against South Carolina and Vandy last year, totally flat. Against Georgia last year, they were flat. There are so many halves of Tennessee football where you can complain, and there's no consistency week to week under Butch Jones. And this team, I don't think they're ever going to win an East because they don't have exceptionary quarterback play. They don't put, you know, they don't put the foot on the throat of the opponent, you know. They never can play complete football in all three phases under Butch Jones. And it's 8-4, 9-3ville every single year with winning a bowl game against a Big Ten school that's a pretty shitty team. That is Butch Jones in a nutshell. Other coaches on the hot seat, I mean, I looked up and Mercer is competing with Auburn, and Gus Malzahn has just lost his way. I mean, I know he had Nick Marshall. Maybe it's like a, you know, a sort of thing where it's like a Kaepernick or an RG3 where the guy starts out great. Everyone thinks that, you know, Malzahn's trajectory as an Auburn head coach is very similar to the trajectory of Colin Kaepernick in the NFL. He goes to a championship, comes within 2 minutes of winning a championship. Everyone thinks he's tremendous, and then from there it's just a decline. And you just look at the players, and Jarrett Stidham is a talented thrower of the ball. He's a 4-star guy. He's not like a Sean White. Now, Sean White is not a talented thrower. Jeremy Johnson isn't either. But Jarrett Stidham can throw the ball. So there's no excuse with Eli Stove, with Slayton, the weapons on the edge that Auburn has, you know, Kyle Davis. They just have a ton of weapons, and they also have Kerryon Johnson, and they also have Cam Petway. They have tremendous offensive personnel. You bring in Chip Lindsey, and this team is a flat-out embarrassment. Offensively, almost losing to Mercer. I mean, the SEC is just, you know, you look at just the turmoil of coaches. Barry Odom today, 35-3. They were 7.5-point favorites. Farragut Field in Missouri today. I mean, that was just embarrassing. I mean, 35-3. Drew Lock is a talented NFL caliber quarterback. You can listen to Trent Dilfer. You can watch Drew Lock throw. And when the ball comes out of Drew Lock's hand, it's just different. And they can't even, and they're playing against Purdue and South Carolina. You just saw what Kentucky did to South Carolina. And Purdue, I mean, that's not a classic defensive team. That they don't have incredible defensive personnel. You got to at least score with Josh Heupel and that hyperspeed offense. I mean, it's a train wreck in Missouri. And, Barry Odom was elevated as, interim head coach, and he's a player's head coach, and the transition was smooth after Pinkel abruptly left. But you look at Missouri, and they should go out and get a new offensive mind. And for Drew Lock, I don't know if the guy's going to have like a Tyler Bray, just snapshot decision and go right to the NFL. But the production he's put up this year, I don't know. I think Jamon Moore's a senior. I think that Locke has to come back another year. He has to try something, maybe transfer to another school if he wants to be a top, third round pick. Because Drew Lock has a ton of potential. He just has never coached up, and when he gets to the NFL, it's going to be so hard for him to adapt to the intricacies of playing in the NFL. Let's talk. I've been waiting on this topic for a damn long time, but let's talk about Mississippi State. This is the biggest story of the day. I mean, not to repeat a Taylor Swift song, but not in the wildest dreams that I think that Mississippi State would score 37 points on LSU tonight. I looked at Nick Fitzgerald and I said, this guy is not a thrower. He's never been a thrower since his days in Stonehill, Georgia, when he was a triple option player. He had success in the Egg Bowl. The team only put up 17 points. I thought Nick Fitzgerald, honestly, was overrated. Guy wasn't even selected to represent his school at SEC Media Days. There's been signs about his maturity and whatnot. 4 picks during the spring game. I watch this guy's mechanics. He's an athlete playing quarterback. He is not a quarterback playing. He's not a quarterback that happens to be an athlete. And tonight, this guy on the national stage in Starkville on ESPN prime time, he lit LSU up. And it was unbelievable to watch. Not only did he gain tough yards with his legs like I expected, but the guy was so composed. He took what the defense gave him. His throwing motion is a lot crisper. It's not all the way there, but it's crisper. He was very accurate underneath. He plays with such an edge. And the defense is just absolutely tremendous. I mean, you look at the Louisville defensive coordinator, right? They switched. Todd Grantham was with Bobby Petrino last year. And Todd Grantham is such an aggressive defensive coordinator. He is a guy that's going to freaking go guns blazing at people. He is a takeaway machine type of guy. His system's not that complex. He's going to blitz a lot. He just wants you to play and not think. And you look at the type of caliber of athlete that Mullen has recruited there. And Jeffrey Simmons, we know about the Jeffrey Simmons story because of last year, but this guy is a 5-star defensive end, and he is just a monster. And he's going to be a first-round pick. They have linebackers that are first-round picks. Montez Sweat is a guy that's like a linebacker / a rusher hybrid guy. He's going to be playing on Sundays. Leo Lewis, a tackling machine. Jerry Green. This defense, the corners, they hit and they are aggressive and they are nasty. They play with such an edge. They are a nasty, nasty football team. They play and they try to kick the piss out of you. And watching a Mississippi State game, it's almost like watching Seattle Seahawks play defense. It is a beautiful, aggressive, really, really violent style of defense. And they really can play on that side of that football. And then you look at Harris Williams, who is a very skilled running back. The offensive line, led by Rankin, is coming into its own. Dan Mullen is crafting this quarterback Fitzgerald like Prescott, like Tebow, like Alex Smith. Dan Mullen was from the Urban Meyer coaching tree, and he knows how to develop guys. And this is Fitzgerald's team. This Mississippi State team, I mean, I think LSU has talent. I think Tolliver is still a great cornerback. Their linebackers had some dirt dirty, cheap plays today, like where the two guys got, ejected for helmet to helmet. Orgeron's gotta, facing adversity. That's what Ed Orgeron, that's what we have to see him do, because at Ole Miss, the whole thing was a snowball. And he has Aranda and he has Matt Canada. Now, is Mississippi State just incredible? I look at the SEC West, and Arkansas is a mess. Texas A&M is a complete mess. So LSU they're better than both of those teams. Auburn, they have to go to LSU with Stidham. I think that defense is going to kill Jarrett Stidham. I mean, they can't even score 30 versus Mercer. Arden Key, Donnie Alexander, Devin White. This is a heck of a defensive team. Like LSU, I wouldn't push the panic button. Like, this team in the SEC West is still going to be clearly inferred. They are clearly going to get to, 9 wins on the season. Bama is a loss, and looking at the rest of LSU's schedule, the Florida game is going to be an interesting game, but I think they can win that. I think they can beat Tennessee. This might be 10-2 with the only losses coming to Alabama and Mississippi State. But Mississippi State, they host Alabama. This is now a team that they might win the SEC. I mean, that's how crazy Mississippi State play is. And I mean, I know that this is a young team. I know that this is Mississippi State, so you don't want to get, they don't have a history of double-digit wins. Even with Prescott, they went and lost games towards the end of that season. But I think Mississippi State, the way they play football, they should beat Auburn. And they killed LSU tonight. So you got Auburn, you got Arkansas and A&M. You go to A&M. As long as this defense can play the same way. Now, maybe my fear is like, what happens if Mississippi State is like Texas A&M, right? What happens if Mississippi State and this aggressive Todd Grantham defense, what happens if they peter out at the end of the year? What happens if it's like Greg Williams? Because that Louisville defense last year, they got tired and they lost it. Maybe it's an ebbs and flows thing. Maybe Danny Etling I thought Danny Etling was okay tonight. Like, this is Darius Geis. This is a talented offensive line and running back. And to beat LSU by like 30 points, it's just absurd. It's an incredible statement by Mississippi State. Mississippi State played La Tech and Charleston Southern, and you didn't know anything about this team. Even though they held those guys, they played great on defense. Can this team stay healthy? Can this team make it the whole year without stamina issues? I know that they're probably going to drop a stupid football game that they shouldn't lose, but I'd love to see Mississippi State take the leap under Dan Mullen. And then you look at Dan Mullen, and I don't know if he'd leapfrog from one SEC job to another, kind of like Muschamp did with Florida and South Carolina. But you look at Tennessee, and that job can come open. You look at Auburn, it's looking like that job's going to come open. Texas A&M, I think that job with all the pressure that's boiling up in College Station, I think that Sumlin is probably going to head out. I think that Brett Bielema, getting shellacked by TCU. Bielema's not going to survive either at Arkansas. That job's going to come open. Barry Odom, even though he's only in, I believe, his second year, it's pretty clear that we have evidence that when you lose 35-3 to Purdue, when you get laughed off the field by your opponents, this Missouri team is going to be historically an awful team. It's almost like Kansas football at this point for Missouri, even though they have an NFL quarterback and weapons. So Heupel and Barry Odom are probably going to depart. It's going to be crazy. Norvell's going to get elevated. Scott Frost is going to get calls. Chip Kelly's going to get calls. Even the Ryans said that they would coach college football. Les Miles is probably going to go from the booth back to coaching football. Gene Chizik, who knows if he'll get another gig, maybe at Missouri or something. It's going to be an unbelievable stretch for these college coaches. There are a lot of programs in turmoil. Jim Mora at UCLA has no defense, has Rosen. UCLA looks like they can't play any defense and win games. I mean, Memphis, 6 touchdowns for Riley Ferguson today. Great performance by Memphis. They are like the new Arkansas State in terms of the breeding ground of college football. And then you also look at, Mike Riley at Nebraska. And this Husker team lacks the identity. Memorial Stadium in the fall is a sacred place with Tom Osborne and the legend of Frazier. It's a legend. The black shirts. It's a legendary football, traditional, Big Ten power or Big 12 power, whatever you want to think. And Nebraska's lost its identity. They're a soft West Coast team. I know Pelini would get embarrassed in, the Big Ten championships. I didn't think I thought Bo's time there. I wasn't upset when Bo left. If you look from a Huskers perspective, he had good seasons, 9-win years. It was fun time. The Taylor Martinez, era, the Sioux era. There were some defenses that were great. That Texas game is one that always will be remembered as a game that Nebraska, got jobbed, and they should have, ended up winning that Big 12 that year. So Pelini did fine, but you look at Mike Riley, and, Mike Riley, this team is soft. Tanner Lee is a statue back there in the pocket. The offensive line's a mess. They're taking on the personality of an apathetic head coach. They get bullied around by MAC programs. And you look at how young college football coaching is, and you look at the programs that have had abrupt coaching changes, and look at Minnesota with PJ Fleck, how they're rolling right now. Look at PJ Fleck. I mean, this guy, 34-3 again. Don't look now, but Minnesota, they're building a power. They're building a power up north. Look at Willie Taggart, best game to date. Justin Herbert, Oregon Ducks, they're rolling already. They look like they're better than Stanford. Everybody talks about how great that Pac-12 is. I mean, Oregon could really surprise people in this Pac-12. Defense is coming alive. Foreman is a hell of a running back. I don't know if it might not be Foreman. They have at Oregon, they have an amazing running back. I think it might be Freeman. That's the running back at Oregon. And Oregon's a really good football team. So Willie Taggart, PJ Fleck, Jeff Brom of Purdue. Purdue's already better than Nebraska. Scott Frost is gonna get hired. He's doing great, but look at Lincoln Riley. Everybody thought, oh my gosh, Bob Stoops is leaving. What is Oklahoma gonna do now? They're gonna suck now. I mean, Lincoln Riley comes in from East Carolina, offensive coordinates for a couple of years, and he's outbeaten Urban Meyer now. Kirby Smart goes out and beats Brian Kelly at Notre Dame with a freshman quarterback in his second season, and everybody's still, so fixated on Mark Richt. I mean, going out and look at what Tom Herman did tonight. Look at the improvement from Texas from week 1 to week 3. I mean, going out and being a little bit impulsive, firing ahead, when you know that the head coach can't get it done, pulling the trigger and getting young blood and getting a stud in there, it doesn't take too long to change the program. Jim Harbaugh comes in, changes the program. Brom has changed the program at Purdue. Fleck has changed the program. Taggart has changed the program. Young coaches in college football, they come in there, they change the program. They change the narrative if you get a great young coach. It ain't that much of a risk. I mean, would you rather stay 8-4 forever? Or would you rather take a swing and likely end up with a young coach that has a lot of pizzazz, can go recruit, relate to these kids, and ball? Because Mike Riley, Justin Fuente, dudes are rocking. Young coaches are balling out right now. And in college football, hell, even Shawnee McVay right now. I know that the Rams haven't played the Redskins. But young coaches, everybody talks about how coaching, you have to be qualified and whatnot, like Mike Lombardi and all that shit. That's a freaking myth right now, because young coaches go out there in college football and they're dealing. That's a straight up fact, is that young coaches in college football, get them in there and let them deal, because PJ's dealing. Willie Taggart's dealing, Herbert's dealing. That Oregon team is good. So young coaches are dealing. Tennessee and Florida are still stuck. The SEC East, South Carolina takes a huge step back, and Mississippi State has a realistic chance if this Todd Grantham defense can stay strong and not get too worn out, because they are going 100 miles per hour right now. If they can find a way to compete in Athens, I can't wait for that game in Athens. Nick Fitzgerald comes home to Georgia for his only game that he will ever play in his college career at Sanford Stadium. He probably grew up a Georgia fan, wanted to be a Georgia Bulldog. He probably has some mixed emotions, to put it lightly, about going back to Athens. And that game's a 7 o'clock game. They put Vandy, Alabama, but, Mississippi State, Georgia, that game is going to be a doozy. I thought Mississippi State would lose. I thought they'd get rolled by LSU. I thought Fitzgerald get bottled up. That was a crazy result. Missouri getting blown out, crazy result. South Carolina being pretenders and losing Debo. They go back down when we were just ready to think that they could take the leap. They lay an egg. And Mississippi State, they're really the story of college football. Sam Ehlinger's a story of college football. PJ Fleck and Willie Taggart, they are stories. Mike Riley and the downfall of Nebraska. I know that Nebraska used to win recruiting because they were the team. They were the middle of the country. They had the only TV deal. Them, Notre Dame, the glory days, the U of Miami. But now you look at the traditional powers, and with the competition of everybody gets a TV deal, everyone's on TV all the time, the Texases, the Nebraskas, we live in a world where Purdue is just as good as Nebraska is at football. And that's pretty staggering. That's astonishing. And that's the world that we live in, where Louisville and Clemson are, just as good as Texas, and Clemson's the next incredible program with Dabo. So great day at college. College is amazing. So many storylines. You could talk about this all day long. Ole Miss is still going on. It's just crazy. College football is a beautiful, beautiful sport, and we got still NFL football. So the fall is just a tremendous time, and I'll let you guys run. It was a lot of fun. Let's do some film reviews and